My name is Madison Clark. I'm 30 years old, and a few hours ago, my father told me to go live on the streets. His exact words were, "If you're so determined to chase this stupid dream, then pack your things and go live in the streets like the losers you admire." He didn't know I already make $17 million a year. I was standing at the end of the dining table in the house I grew up in, the same house where I once beamed over A-plus report cards and honor roll certificates. Now those memories felt like props in someone else's life. My father's face was red, his fist pressed into the table, veins standing out in his neck. My mother stared at her plate, and the silence between his sentences hurt more than his shouting. "You're 30, Madison, 30. You have no house, no husband, no real job. You sit in front of a laptop all day pretending you're some big shot. If your little online fantasy fails, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. Go live on the streets and see how far your apps take you out there." There was a time when those words would have shattered me. Tonight, something different happened. A strange calm washed over me. I watched his lips move, watched the disgust twist his features, but all I could think about was the number that had hit my inbox that morning. Skyline Sync. Annual recurring revenue, $17,024,318. 2 weeks. That was how long it would take before that number appeared on screens he actually respected. The local news, the business pages, the people whose approval he chased. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need his. I picked up my overnight bag, the one he didn't notice I'd already packed, and smiled. "Okay," I said softly, "if that's what you want. If you've ever been told you're a failure by the person who was supposed to believe in you the most, you know that smile isn't peace. It's a promise." Before I tell you what happened after I walked out with nothing but a suitcase and a secret, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where in the world are you watching from? I want to see just how far this revenge-filled family story is about to travel. When I stepped off their front porch into the cool Washington night, the air felt thinner, almost weightless, like someone had finally cut a chain I'd been dragging for years. The porch light clicked off behind me before I'd even reached the sidewalk. That was my father's final punctuation mark. No, come back. No, we'll talk later. Just darkness. I tossed my bag into the back of my car and sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart pounding. For a second, I let myself feel it all. Anger, humiliation, that familiar ache of being the wrong daughter in the wrong family. Then my phone buzzed. A voice note from Naomi popped up on the lock screen. I'd texted her during dinner under the table. "He told me to go live on the streets. I think he means it." Now I hit play. Her voice filled the car, warm and steady. "Mads, I know you're probably shaking right now, but listen to me. You don't have to convince him you're worth something. You already are. You built a whole company from your laptop while he mocked you for playing on the computer. That's not failure, it's leverage. Use it. You said Skyline's big partnership signs in 2 weeks, right? Let them think you're nothing until the ink is dry. Then decide what kind of daughter you want to be to people who threw you out." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. She was right, and it hurt. For years, I'd tried to soften the truth for my parents, minimizing my success so it wouldn't sound like bragging, like I was rubbing my weird tech life in their blue-collar faces. I told them I consulted remotely instead of running a SaaS company with clients in 12 countries. I said, "We're doing okay," instead of, "We just passed 8 figures." They had always assumed online meant fake. Tonight, they'd promoted that assumption into a verdict. Useless, failure, get out. Part of me wanted to turn the car around, storm back inside, open my striped dashboard and shove the numbers in my father's face until his pride cracked. Another part of me wasn't sure I wanted them anywhere near this version of me. How do you let someone back into your life after they tell you to go survive on concrete? Have you ever needed a friend to remind you your value doesn't shrink just because someone you love refuses to see it? I hit the video call button before I could change my mind. Naomi answered in seconds, hair in a messy bun, blue light reflecting off her glasses. "There she is," she said softly. "Tell me exactly what he said, word for word." I repeated it, every syllable tasting like rust in my mouth. When I finished, she took a deep breath. "Okay, then here's what we're going to do. You are not going to waste another breath begging for respect. You're going to treat the next 2 weeks like a countdown. You've got that enterprise contract with Horizon Dynamics on the table, right? When that's signed and announced, your ARR goes public, the valuation doubles, and the same people who call you a loser now will be bragging that they always believed in you. Your revenge isn't screaming back tonight. Your revenge is success so undeniable it embarrasses them in front of everyone they were trying to impress by tearing you down." I laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh. "And in the meantime, I'm technically homeless according to my father." "You have a high-rise in Seattle and equity in your own company, Madison. You're not homeless. He just handed you the permission slip to stop trying to keep the peace. Take it." Her words burned and soothed at the same time. I thought about every time my father had compared me to Jenna. "At least your sister works a real job." And every time my mother had asked, "Are you sure this computer thing is safe?" I had stayed patient, hoping that one day a single big milestone would flip a switch in their heads and make them proud. Tonight I realized that for some people, no switch exists. "So, what now?" I whispered. Naomi's eyes softened. "Now you drive back to Seattle. You open your laptop. You record everything. How you feel, what they said, what you want. Turn it into fuel. In 2 weeks, when you're standing on that stage next to Horizon's CEO, your story will hit different. And if you ever decide to let them back into your life, it will be on your terms." I glanced back at the dark house one last time. No silhouettes in the windows, no one watching me leave. "Fine," I said. "Then tonight is the last night I drive away from here feeling small." I put the car in drive. As I pulled away, a thought slipped in, sharp and cold. Maybe revenge wasn't about making them hurt. It was about finally refusing to let them hurt me. Have you ever walked away from your own family to protect your sanity? Keep watching, because the next 2 weeks of my life turned that painful drive into the most powerful decision I've ever made. I didn't sleep much that night. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of my building in Seattle, the sky was turning a soft gray. My apartment sat on the 25th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that once made me feel guilty. I'd tell my parents I was renting a place with roommates, while my badge to Skyline Sync's private elevator hung on a hook by the door. That morning, I dropped my bag inside, ignored the unmade bed, and headed straight to my desk. I opened my laptop, hit record on a blank video call window, and started talking. To myself, to Naomi, to future me who might forget how this felt. "Day 0, I said. "My father told me to live on the streets. He thinks I don't have a real job. He has no idea my little computer thing keeps 312 remote teams running across the world. 2 weeks from now, Horizon Dynamics will announce they've standardized on Skyline Sync. 2 weeks from now, my face will be in the same local paper he reads every morning while he eats his eggs and complains about the economy. The funny thing is, I'm not sure I even want him to be proud of me anymore." Then I did something I'd never done. I opened a new document titled, "Everything They Don't Know." Instead of a traditional montage of shots, my mind flickered through bullet points as my fingers flew. First client at 23, working nights after my corporate job. Left that job at 26. Overslept and missed Jenna's graduation because I was on a Zoom with a client in Singapore. Dad said I was selfish. Didn't tell them I was covering Mom's medical bills anonymously last year. They assumed the hospital was just being kind. Scheduled finance meeting for Tuesday. Projected ARR after Horizon contract, quarter 17M. Personal net worth, high seven figures. Emotional net worth with family, overdrafted. Have you ever listed out your own life and realized you've been writing a completely different story in your head than the one your family sees? The next days blurred into what felt like a challenge list I hadn't agreed to, but was determined to complete. I had calls with Horizon's legal team to finalize terms. I had an emergency meeting with my own board to lock in a valuation before rumors leaked. I had a late-night debugging session with my lead engineer after a minor outage in Europe that could have given Horizon cold feet. Then, because life has a sense of humor, my dad called. His name on my screen made my stomach lurch. A part of me hoped he'd soften, say he'd overreacted. Instead, when I answered, his tone was flat, almost bored. "Just checking if you've come to your senses yet," he said. "You find a real job, Madison? Or are you still chasing fairy dust?" I stared at the lines of code scrolling on my second monitor. "I'm working," I replied. "Ian, I have a big contract finalizing in a few days." He snorted. "You and your contracts? Look, you're still on our family phone plan. Your mother thinks we should keep paying for it until you get settled. I don't see the point in funding your little rebellion. You want to live on your own terms? You pay your own bills. When the next invoice hits, I'm canceling your line." It was almost funny. My phone line cost them $40 a month. Earlier that day, a vendor had just invoiced Skyline Sync for $90,000, and we'd paid it without blinking. "Don't worry about it," I said quietly. "I'll take care of everything from now on." "We'll see," he muttered, then hung up. That click cut deeper than the threat. It wasn't about money, it was about erasing responsibility. The message was clear. If I failed now, it was entirely my fault. That night, while my team rehearsed Horizon's onboarding flow over and over, I added another line to my document. They didn't just throw me out of the house. They threw out the last excuse I had to stay small. In between slide decks and contract red lines, a question kept circling in my mind. Would you still dare to start something big if you knew every safety net behind you was about to be cut? I realized I already had. The Horizon Dynamics announcement week felt like standing inside a storm made of email notifications and calendar alerts. On Monday, their CEO's assistant confirmed the joint press release schedule. On Tuesday, our PR firm sent over the headline, "Horizon Dynamics standardizes global remote operations on Skyline Sync." On Wednesday, Ethan flew up from San Francisco to walk me through last-minute talking points for the live-streamed signing. "They're not just a client," he reminded me as we sat in Skyline's glass-walled conference room overlooking the Seattle skyline. "They're a signal. Once this goes public, every mid-market company that's been watching from the sidelines will call. You're about to jump tears, Mads." I nodded, but my mind kept drifting back to my father's words. "Go live in the streets." I wondered what he'd say if he saw the view from this conference room. If he realized the rent for this floor alone could probably cover his company's payroll for months. At the same time, miles away in our old neighborhood, my name was starting to appear in conversations I wasn't part of. I didn't know it then, but while I was rehearsing my speech, my aunt forwarded my dad a link she'd stumbled across on LinkedIn. "Isn't this Madison's company?" she'd written under Skyline Sync's page, where the teaser for the Horizon announcement had just gone up. My father, who barely tolerated smartphones, tapped the link anyway. He saw my headshot beside the words, "Founder and CEO," the follower count. The excited comments from people he'd never heard of. His first reaction wasn't pride, it was suspicion. According to my cousin, who later filled me in, he'd scoffed at the screen. "Anyone can put CEO on the internet," he'd grumbled. "Doesn't mean it's real." Back in Seattle, we didn't have time to worry about his denial. The Horizon team flew in. Our office buzzed with caterers and AV technicians. We turned our open space into a mini stage, skyline banners, a large screen showing a live dashboard of our uptime metrics, rows of chairs for employees and press. Naomi texted me photos from her living room in Portland, where she'd set up snacks to watch the live stream like it was a movie premiere. "Front row seat to your revenge arc," she wrote, adding a fire emoji. The morning of the signing, I dressed in a navy blazer, simple jewelry, hair pulled back. No overcompensation, no sequins, just clean lines that said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." As makeup artists finished fussing over the Horizon CEO in the green room, Logan, my old college friend turned tech reporter, leaned over to me with a grin. "Off the record," he murmured, "once this goes live, your estimated ARR is what, 17 mil? You realize you're about to become the overnight success people in my comments love to argue about." Overnight success. 12 years of late nights collapsed into 2 words. I almost laughed. "Just make sure you spell my name right," I said. What I didn't know until later was that my father's name would also appear on a screen that day. The local news network Logan freelanced for had picked up the Horizon story for their business segment. They liked the angle. Small-town girl from Washington builds software used by global corporations. Somewhere between the weather report and a construction update, a producer slotted in a clip from our live stream. While I was backstage checking my mic, my parents' TV flickered with the Skyline logo. My face, the one my father still saw as the daughter who wasted her potential, filled his living room. Confident, smiling, standing beneath a banner that read, "Skyline Sync X Horizon Dynamics Strategic Partnership." As I walked onto the stage in Seattle to the sound of applause, my father was lowering the remote in confusion. "Elaine," he called out, "come here, isn't that Madison?" I stepped up to the podium, the studio lights hot against my skin, and looked out at the sea of faces. My team, Horizon's executives, reporters, a handful of investors. The giant screen behind me displayed Skyline Sync's interface, clean and calm, a visual contrast to the chaos in my chest. "Thank you all for being here," I began. When I wrote the first lines of code for Skyline Sync in a cramped studio apartment, I didn't imagine we'd one day be helping companies like Horizon Dynamics coordinate teams across 23 time zones. I just knew there had to be a better way for people to work together without losing their minds or their humanity. I talked about remote work, about giving people in small towns and big cities the same access to meaningful jobs. I talked about the team behind the product, how many of them came from families who thought their computer work wasn't real either. I did not talk about my father telling me to go live on the streets 3 nights earlier. But it was there, under every word, giving them weight. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Horizon's CEO joined me to sign the agreement, the cameras zooming in as we exchanged folders. On the screen behind us, a graphic flashed, projected annual revenue impact, 17,000 plus. Somewhere, my father saw that number and stopped breathing for a second. After the signing, the reporter from the local station stepped forward for a brief Q&A. It was supposed to be routine. Questions about trends, remote work, the future. Then Logan raised his hand. He'd warned me earlier. "Mind if we talk about where you came from?" he asked with a half smile. "A lot of our viewers are from your hometown." I swallowed. Part of me wanted to keep it surface level. Another part of me heard Naomi's voice in my head. "Use it." "Sure," I replied. I grew up in a small town where most people worked with their hands: construction, nursing, mechanics. Tech felt like something that belonged to other places. When I started working online, a lot of people, even in my own family, thought it wasn't real work, that I was wasting my time. "And now?" Logan asked. "Now Skyline Sync employs over 80 people and supports thousands of jobs indirectly," I said. So I guess it turned out to be real enough. The audience laughed softly. The camera panned across the crowd. No one in Seattle knew that a man in a living room in Washington was gripping his remote so tightly his knuckles had gone white. They didn't hear him growl. Why didn't she tell us? My mother, sitting beside him, didn't answer. She just watched the lower third banner that read, "Local Founders Startup Hits Multi-Million-Dollar Milestone," and tried to reconcile the calm, articulate woman on the screen with the daughter she'd watched leave the house, with tears shining in her eyes. When the segment ended, they should have turned the TV off, processed quietly. Instead, my father did something spectacularly on-brand. He decided to confront me in person. It wasn't hard to find me. The station announced the event location at the end of the segment. While I was thanking my team and posing for photos, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We're outside." I froze. Naomi, watching the stream, texted me at the same time. "Is that your dad's truck in the background of one of the crowd shots, or am I hallucinating?" I handed my champagne glass to an intern and walked toward the lobby, heart hammering. Through the glass doors I saw them. My father in his worn work jacket, my mother clutching her handbag, and Jenna still in scrubs, arms folded, expression unreadable. They looked wildly out of place among the suits and lanyards. For a moment I considered turning back. Then a different instinct took over. The one that had kept me up writing code when everyone told me to get a real job. I pushed the door open. "You came," I said, voice careful. My father didn't waste time. $17 million? He demanded, voice low but sharp. "We saw the number. We saw you on TV. What is this, Madison?" My mother flinched at his tone. People in the lobby began to glance our way. "It's my company," I replied, keeping my chin level. "The same one I've been working on for years." Jenna's eyes narrowed. "You never said it was like this," she said. "You made it sound like some hobby." Maybe because every time I mentioned it, someone made a joke about me playing on the computer. I shot back before I could stop myself. The words hung there between us. My father's jaw clenched. "We had to find out from the television that our daughter is... what? Some kind of big shot? You couldn't trust your own family with the truth? Have you ever been accused of betraying people who had just thrown you away?" The irony tasted bitter. "3 nights ago," I said quietly, "you told me to go live on the streets. You said if I failed, it was my problem. You turned off the porch light while I was still walking down the path." His ears reddened. "I was trying to scare you into growing up." "I grew up," I replied. "You just weren't paying attention." The lobby suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. A couple of reporters lingered near the entrance, pretending not to watch. Employees drifted by, their eyes flicking between my face and my father's clenched jaw. If I raised my voice, this would become a spectacle. If I stayed silent, my father would control the story. Again. I chose a third option. "Come with me," I said, motioning toward a smaller side lounge off the main hall. It had glass walls, comfortable chairs, and, most importantly, a large screen mounted on the wall. The perfect place to show, not just tell. They followed, reluctantly. Once inside, I closed the door but didn't pull the blinds. Let them see, I thought. Let them all see. My father crossed his arms, planting his feet like he was bracing for a fight. "I don't need a tour of your fancy office," he snapped. "I need to understand how my own daughter has been hiding millions of dollars from her family." Something inside me snapped into focus. "Hiding," I repeated. "Dad?" "I wasn't hiding. I was surviving. There's a difference." I grabbed the remote and synced my laptop to the screen with a few taps. Skyline Sync's admin dashboard filled the display. Live user counts, global server uptimes, and in the upper corner, our current ARR number updating in real time, $17,031,140. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jenna's eyes widened. My father blinked, then leaned forward, trying to find something to dismiss. "Anyone can fake numbers on a TV," he muttered. I almost laughed. "You think I hacked the TV to impress you?" I toggled to the Horizon contract summary, logos, legal signatures, bank routing numbers. Then, with a deep breath, I opened my personal banking app and slid the window onto the screen. My balances appeared. Brutally clear. "This is my reality," I said softly. "This is what playing on the computer got me. And this," I gestured back toward the main room where the partnership celebration continued, "is only the beginning." Have you ever wanted to show someone every receipt for every time they underestimated you? This was that moment. My father stared at the numbers, then at me. For the first time, he looked not angry, but afraid. Not of me, but of what this said about him, about how badly he'd misjudged his own child. "Why didn't you tell us?" he whispered. "Because every time I tried to share even a small win, you turned it into a lecture about real jobs and serious careers," I replied. "You made it clear you weren't interested in understanding my world. You just wanted me to fit into yours. So I stopped trying to make you proud and focused on building a life I could be proud of." Jenna shifted, her voice small. "You're richer than everyone we know," she said, half in awe, half in accusation. "This isn't about being richer," I answered. "It's about you all thinking you had the right to call me a failure without even asking what my life looked like." My father's face hardened again, his pride scrambling for a foothold. "We're your parents," he said. "We had a right to push you, to demand better." "Push me to what?" I asked. "To a job I'd hate? To a life that looked respectable in Christmas photos? You didn't demand better. You demanded familiar. There's a difference." Outside the glass, I noticed Logan and another reporter had paused, trying not to stare too directly. My father followed my gaze and realized we had an audience. His voice dropped. "Turn that off," he hissed, nodding at the screen. "This is family business." I held his gaze. "It stopped being just family business the moment you told me to go live on the streets," I said quietly. "You don't get to publicly humiliate me and then insist on privacy when the truth makes you look bad. Not today." The words landed like a slap. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then my mother found her voice. "Madison," she pleaded, "you have to understand, your father was scared. It's hard for us to see you doing something we don't understand. People talk. They ask what you do, and we don't know how to answer. It makes us feel like we failed you somehow." I swallowed. There it was, the insecurity under all their criticism. "So instead of admitting you didn't understand, you decided I must be the failure," I said. "And when I refused to live small enough to make you comfortable, you threw me out." My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at the screen one more time, then at the indistinct shapes of my colleagues moving past the glass. He saw people stopping to glance in, curiosity on their faces. It hit him. This wasn't just about our family hierarchy anymore. This was about his reputation in a room full of people who now knew the truth. "What do you want from us?" he finally asked, voice hoarse. "Money? An apology?" I shook my head. "I don't want your money," I said, "and an apology won't rewind that night. What I want is simple. I want you to understand that I am not coming back to being the daughter you controlled by withholding approval. I built something you didn't believe in. It turned out to be worth 8 figures a year. That's not an invitation to climb on board now that it's safe. It's a boundary." He stared at me, the meaning sinking in. "You'd cut off your own family?" he whispered. "If staying close means shrinking myself so you can feel big?" I replied. "Yes. The room went quiet enough that we could hear muffled applause from the main hall. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Jenna stared at the floor. "So that's it," he said finally. "You don't need us anymore." I took a breath. "I will always need a family," I said. "But I refuse to keep chasing one that uses love as a weapon. If you want a relationship with me, it will be as the woman you see on that screen, not the girl you ordered to go live on the streets." The days after the Horizon announcement blurred into a strange mix of triumph and fallout. On the surface, my life exploded in the best way possible. Skyline Sync's inbox flooded with partnership inquiries. Our website almost crashed from the traffic spike. Investors I'd chased for years suddenly sent apologetic emails about missing the boat and asked if we might have room in the next round. Logan's segment about my small town to startup story went mildly viral, clipped and shared across social media with captions like, "Parents said she was a failure. Then, this happened." People loved a good revenge story. They didn't see the quieter, messier side of what came next. In my hometown, my parents became reluctant celebrities overnight. At the hardware store where my father bought supplies for his projects, people nodded at him differently. Some congratulated him. "You must be so proud," before realizing his tight smile didn't quite match the script. Others, the ones who'd heard rumors about him kicking me out, were less kind. "Funny," one neighbor reportedly said, "how you said Madison's computer thing was a waste of time. Guess you were wrong." Pride has a way of clawing back when it's cornered. Instead of a quiet reckoning, my father tried to rewrite the story. He told people he'd pushed me to be tough, that telling me to go live on the streets was just a figure of speech. He painted himself as the tough love hero who'd forged a millionaire. Unfortunately for him, the internet remembered. Logan's full interview clip resurfaced, including the part where I mentioned being told my work wasn't real and being treated like a failure. Commenters did what commenters do best. They filled in the blanks, exaggerated edges, turned my father into a sort of cautionary tale. "Imagine throwing out a kid who secretly makes millions," one caption read. "Parents like this don't deserve front row seats." It wasn't entirely fair. No viral story ever is, but I didn't rush to correct it. Actions have consequences. For my sister Jenna, the fallout took a different shape. At the hospital where she worked, colleagues shared the video in break rooms. "Isn't that your sister?" they asked. Some were impressed. Others raised eyebrows at the parts where I talked about being compared unfavorably to a more respectable sibling. For the first time, Jenna had to sit with the idea that her perfect image came at someone else's expense. One night, she called me. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, her voice was brittle. "They keep playing that video," she said without greeting. "The one where you talk about them not respecting your work. People look at me like I was in on it." "You were," I said, not unkindly. "You laughed when Dad called my company a hobby. You rolled your eyes when I said I had late-night calls. You treated my work like a phase." Silence. Then a shaky inhale. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. I thought you'd grow out of it. Like a college obsession." "I grew into it," I answered. "And you never asked what it meant to me." There was another pause. Then softly, "What does it mean to you?" The question came 10 years late, but it was real. For the first time, I told her. Not the glossy investor pitch, but the messy core. How code had saved me when I felt like an outsider in our town. How building Skyline Sync made me feel powerful and terrified at the same time. How every sarcastic comment from our father had landed like a weight I had to code my way out from under. By the time I finished, Jenna was crying quietly on the other end. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know if I know how to fix this, but I don't want to be part of the reason you stayed small." "Then don't be," I said. You don't have to choose between them and me, but you do have to decide whether you're going to keep pretending nothing happened. As for my parents, they tried to reach out several times. My mother left long voicemails about misunderstandings and hard times, never quite saying the word sorry. My father sent one email that read, "We should talk about how to present the family now that you're in the public eye." Present the family, as if this were a branding exercise. That email told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. So I made a choice. I didn't blow up their inboxes with rage. I didn't cut them off with a dramatic social media post. I set clear, boring boundaries. I replied with a short message. I am open to a conversation that starts with acknowledging what happened and how it affected me. I am not interested in discussing image, money, or how you can benefit from my work. If that's a conversation you're ready to have, let me know. Weeks passed with no answer that met those terms. That silence was an answer of its own. People think revenge is about grand gestures, buying the house you were kicked out of, showing up in a Lamborghini, cutting people off in the most cinematic way possible. For me, the real revenge was quieter. I stopped inviting them into decisions where they'd never shown up with support. I stopped shrinking my wins to protect their comfort. I stopped confusing blood with entitlement. Instead, I poured my energy into the people who had believed in me when it wasn't convenient. My team, my friends, the young engineers from small towns who messaged me after the video went viral and said, "My parents don't get what I'm building either. Thank you for making me feel less crazy." 1 year later, I stood on a different stage at a tech conference, telling a sanitized version of my story to a room full of founders. I didn't mention my father by name or repeat his worst words. I talked about doubt, about the cost of outgrowing people's expectations, about choosing yourself without turning bitter. Afterward, a girl with shaking hands came up to me. "My dad tells me I'm delusional for wanting to start a company," she said. "He says I'll end up with nothing. I don't make $17 million. I don't make anything yet. But hearing you, it helps." I looked at her and saw my younger self. "You don't need $17 million to prove you deserve respect," I told her. "You just need to stop giving your power to people who refuse to see you. The money is just math. The real work is believing in yourself before anyone else does." That night, back in my apartment, I watched the city lights and thought about my father. I knew he was somewhere, still grappling with the reality that the daughter he thought he'd scared straight had simply walked into a different kind of life. Maybe one day we would sit across from each other and have the conversation my email asked for. Maybe we wouldn't. Either way, I had already made peace with something bigger. My worth wasn't on his table anymore. It was on mine. Final. If the people who were supposed to love you first became the ones who doubted you the most, what would you choose? Fighting for their approval or fighting for your own future? Tell me in the comments which path you'd take and where in my story you first thought, "I would have walked away too."